Ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and all welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we take a look into the messy world of Georgian elections as the ruling party, Georgian Dream, has now ratified its victory in a sketchy vote last month. And just like when your friend insists that they won a game of Monopoly without any cheating, everyone's a little suspicious. The opposition is crying foul play, claiming the election was manipulated, calling it, and I quote, a Russian special operation. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather the two elephants, the ethnic Armenian and Azerbaijani communities in Georgia. These groups traditionally support the ruling party, and this time they've been accused of, winning the election for Georgian Dream. So, how does that situation pan out, and how do the governments in both Baku and Yerevan respond to this issue? Well, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
The ruling Georgian Dream party has won the recent Georgian parliamentary elections, while 4 opposition parties passed the electoral threshold with around 10% of the votes each. They have refused to accept their mandates, alleging widespread election fraud. The election outcome has implications for Armenia, as Georgia's pivot away from the West complicates the country's Western-oriented foreign policy. With Azerbaijan maintaining a non-Western stance and both Iran and Russia having strained relations with the West, Armenia finds itself increasingly isolated in its regional foreign policy approach. While immediate economic repercussions are unlikely, experts caution that prolonged instability in Georgia, potentially fueled by opposition protests, could harm Armenia's economy. With over 70% of Armenia's external trade transiting through Georgia, any disruptions could significantly affect supply chains. Azerbaijan, meanwhile, has officially welcomed the victory of the ruling Georgian Dream party, dismissing widespread allegations of electoral fraud. The Azerbaijani government and media have celebrated the results as a victory for regional stability and a setback for Western liberal democratic influence in the South Caucasus. Some reports reveal that Azerbaijani authorities provided specific directives to media outlets and NGOs to frame the election outcome in a manner aligning with the regional narrative. This messaging emphasized Georgian Dream's role in preserving peace, development and tradition, while painting opposition parties as Western proxies aiming to destabilize the region.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Opposition leaders in Georgia have claimed that Baku was nudging ethnic Azerbaijanis to vote for Georgian Dream. This has predictably sparked tension. Suddenly, every vote from a minority community is being scrutinized more than a fake Gucci sweater at a Tbilisi bazaar. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of these accusations, let's back up. Georgian Dream's victory is about more than winning an election. It's about the country's direction. And according to critics, that direction is heading straight into the arms of Mother Russia. Which, let's be honest, isn't exactly surprising given the current political climate. Georgia's Prime Minister, Irakli Kopakidze, has been accused of cozying up to Moscow like it's the only seat left at the bar. Just don't check what they put in drinks in that establishment. Even President Shalom Zurabishvili chimed in, declaring that the election results were falsified. She called it a Russian special operation, which, if you've been paying attention, is Russia's favorite brand, like Starbucks, found on every corner of Eastern Europe's geopolitical map. However, it's worth reminding that despite all this noise, international observers from the OSCE couldn't confirm any irregularities that would have changed the election's outcome. Meanwhile, leaders from Armenia and Azerbaijan were quick to congratulate Georgia's ruling party, but their praise wasn't just a friendly high five, it was more like a strategic pat on the back. You see, both countries rely on Georgia for trade and transit. It's their main corridor, their lifeline. And let's be real, you don't want to piss off your lifeline, especially when Russia is lurking around the corner like a debt collector. However, this congratulatory mood wasn't shared by everyone. Pro-opposition media in Armenia criticized Pashinyan's move, arguing that it was a mistake. They even speculated that this could indicate a shift in Armenia's foreign policy back towards Moscow's embrace. It's like watching someone nervously backtrack into the arms of an ex you know isn't good for them. Don't do it, you want to yell, but here we are, watching it happen in slow motion. And if that wasn't enough drama, the opposition leader of the country was accused of being an ethnic Armenian. If that's supposed to be an insult, it's flying right past me. At some point, I half expected someone to yell, "Your mom's from Yerevan," during a campaign rally. The Georgian political scene has officially regressed to a middle school cafeteria fight, a confusing one at that. Adding fuel to the fire, polling data showed that ethnic Azerbaijani regions overwhelmingly supported Georgian Dream, with vote shares as high as 90%. This is the kind of turnout that makes you say, whoa, either they really love Georgian Dream or someone's been stuffing the ballot box like it's Thanksgiving. And like clockwork, reports of electoral violations surfaced, including blatant ballot stuffing in a majority Azerbaijani municipality. Authorities have already arrested a couple of people involved, which is at least a step up from their usual response of, "What? That's totally normal." Georgian Dream's victory may actually signal a broader trend in the South Caucasus. With growing disillusionment towards the West and ongoing geopolitical rivalry, there's a chance that the region could pivot back towards Russia. And if that happens, well, we're in for a bumpy ride. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Rusif Husinov, a director of Topchubashov Center. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Now, today we got quite a complicated one right here. We have Armenia, Azerbaijan, tilting the election in Georgia towards the direction of Russia. We're talking about two countries that traditionally aren't really chummy with each other. And then we have the Georgian president straight out coming and say that the election is rigged. Everything is so entangled together. Can you help us unpack that a little bit? How did it come to this?
Interestingly enough, this time Armenia and Azerbaijan found themselves on the same page when they went on to recognize the outcome of the Georgian elections and immediately congratulating the incumbent Georgian Dream party on its victory. And each country has its own motivation to do so. While the political circles in Yerevan may not be so happy about the results of the Georgia elections, the authorities still needed to maintain good working relations with Georgia, because if you check Armenia's geography, the borders of which is sealed both to the east and to the west with Azerbaijan and Turkey, and it has two actually gateways, Iran and Georgia. We know that the former is under heavy sanctions, so Georgia remains as Armenia's only access to the outer world. Therefore, whether they like it or not, the Armenian authorities had to congratulate the Georgian Dream. In Baku, the government is also interested in a more stable governance in Tbilisi, because the vital infrastructure which exports Azerbaijan's hydrocarbon resources westward goes through Georgia. Therefore, Baku has traditionally kept very good, very working relations with different administrations in Georgia, be it Shevardnadze, be it Saakashvili, and right now, under the Georgian Dream, Georgia maintains strategic partnership with Azerbaijan. In conclusion, to summarize what I just said about these two countries, both Armenia and Azerbaijan are more interested in having a stable governance in Georgia, because some of the pre-election scenarios even predicted very radical events such as civil war-like turmoils, and it is the least Armenia and Azerbaijan would like to see in Georgia: turmoil, chaos, and instability.
Right, so like you mentioned, perhaps this is not that, especially on the Armenian side, that they are in favor of the elected party, but more so that they do have to play nice whoever is put in charge. Is that correct?
That's correct. While Armenia is trying to forge collaboration, value-based collaboration with the Western institutions and countries, which, by the way, overwhelmingly denounced the elections in Georgia, Armenia has little room for maneuver. It tries to decrease its dependence on Russia. This is why it needs very warm relations with Georgia. This is why it needs to normalize its ties with Turkey. Otherwise, with a very poor ties with the neighboring countries, Armenia's pro-Western drift cannot be sustained.
Right, so this is a lot to unpack here when it comes to friends, foes, who allies with who, so bear with me here. So, like you mentioned, Armenia is cozying up with Georgia out of necessity, even though they are having a more Western kind of value-based system. But we do also see that the Georgian Dream Party is being called as one of a more pro-Russian one. So do you think in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, it's still not very productive for the country to turn towards a more Russian direction?
Many experts, both in Yerevan and Tbilisi, as well as in the Western capitals, repeatedly stated that the outcome of the Georgian elections will have an impact on Yerevan's foreign policy priorities. This can be to some extent true, because there was this idea to have Armenia and Georgia hand in hand to have in the Western sphere of influence. However, with the Georgian Dream trying to introduce multi-vectoral foreign policy, and it's not necessarily pro-Russian, because I would definitely give an agency to the incumbent authorities in Tbilisi. They have their own agenda, they have their own agency, and they don't want to take a side, especially in this Western Russian confrontation. And with the re-election of Trump, we don't know what kind of events will unfold in this part of the world, and this is why the cautious approach of the Georgian authorities is more or less understandable. But at the same time, you rightfully mentioned, this might not be the best news for the political establishment in Armenia, because they probably hoped that more pro-Western political forces would come to power in Tbilisi.
All right, thank you so much for unpacking that nuance. I think we usually kind of describe the Georgian Dream Party as perhaps in an oversimplified way to kind of streamline our understanding of the situation over there, which is very, very convoluted. And we're also curious about the ethnic minorities within Georgia, which a lot of people have been saying is what tipped the election over the scale. Do you think that they do indeed have an outsized influence when it comes to the results of this election?
Well, if you just check the percentage of ethnic minorities within the Georgian electorate, this is not so big. Yes, according to the reports, ethnic Armenians and Azerbaijanis overwhelmingly voted for the Georgian Dream Party, but at the same time, it is to a certain extent the failure of the Georgian opposition, who for years ignored the ethnic minorities in Georgia. They did not work with these ethnic groups, but the authorities more or less somehow did work, promised something, etc. And therefore, both Armenians and Azerbaijanis, they voted as they voted. But again, this was not the most crucial step in the outcomes of the Georgian elections.
And within the country itself, how tense are the ethnic tensions? Because we saw one of the accusations for the leader of the Georgian opposition party being thrown around is that he's ethnically Armenian. Whether it be true or not, or my question would be, how is that a factor, and why is that a vector of attack? Does that actually mean something within the Georgian population?
It's really interesting that some of the pre-election campaigns also try to utilize this ethnic card. And even after the elections, if you remember President Salome Zurabishvili's infamous Armenian carousel statement, which really irritated many, both in Armenia and Georgia. And while the whole region, while the Western countries, political circles, they all discuss the Georgian elections, try to speculate about it, their outcomes, etc. These ethnic cards, they do not actually fit into this framework. They really remain irrelevant in this whole geopolitical setup. This is why maybe it was part of this strategy to distract some of the attention from relevant processes, but I don't find them so useful and relevant.
All right, and last but not least, we also saw the Georgian president coming out and saying that that she doesn't find this particular election result to be legitimate. Do you think there's any kind of reason, evidence to back that up? And if that is the case, why did that not happen during the last election cycle?
Well, there are speculations that the elections of the current president, Salome Zurabishvili, was not so smooth and transparent either. She did not voice up her concerns back then when she was elected, but nowadays she claims the recent ones were rigged elections. Unfortunately, I'm not on the ground to assess the situation, but according to my knowledge, there are certain cases in Georgian courts, and they are being and nowadays checked by the Georgian judges in order to understand the level or the scale of all these wrongdoings during the election. But whether all these allegations are proven or not, the fact is that Georgian opposition, even in the united form, could not challenge the Georgian Dream party, and they were overwhelmingly defeated. However, whether the Georgian Dream would be able to have the sufficient numbers of deputies in order to convene a new parliament, this is another question. And in the coming days, we will see how things develop in this direction.
Right, so we'll have to see how it unfolds. In the meantime, thank you so much for helping us untangle all of these. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on Eastern Express. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that Kyiv is aiming to end the ongoing war with Russia through diplomatic efforts by 2025. His statement follows a recent call between German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Russian President Vladimir Putin, marking the first Berlin-Moscow leadership contact in 2 years. The call has drawn significant controversy.
The situation on the Ukrainian front lines remains dire, with Russia making significant advances against Kyiv's forces in recent months. President Zelensky recently emphasized the importance of securing a peaceful resolution through negotiations, though no significant talks have taken place between Moscow and Kyiv so far. The comment came a day after Russian President Putin spoke with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, marking the first significant Western-Russian communication in nearly 2 years. While Scholz urged Putin to withdraw his troops and engage in meaningful peace talks, the Russian leader reiterated his demand that Ukraine abandon NATO ambitions and accept Russia's territorial gains. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky criticized the conversation, warning it could open a Pandora's box by weakening Putin's international isolation. Zelensky expressed concern that such diplomatic engagement could prolong the war by giving the Russian leader an opportunity to shift Western public opinion on continued military support for Ukraine.
Russia has suspended its natural gas deliveries to Austria amid a payment dispute with Austrian energy provider OMV. Despite the stoppage, Austrian consumers remain unaffected for now, as the nation relies on sufficient gas reserves to offset the supply disruption.
Austria's energy regulator E-Control confirmed that Gazprom's deliveries to OMV have ceased. The dispute stems from a €230 million arbitration award in favor of OMV, which sought compensation for unfulfilled supplies to its German unit by Gazprom. OMV has attempted to offset the damages by withholding some payments for gas delivered via Ukraine, prompting the suspension. Austria's OMV typically accounts for 40% of the gas transiting via Ukraine, equivalent to 17 million cubic meters daily. The pipeline's future is uncertain, however, as Kyiv plans to terminate the existing transit agreement with Gazprom at the end of 2024, further reducing Russian gas routes into Europe. For now, Russia continues to supply natural gas to other European customers via the pipeline. Gazprom reported steady volumes of 42.4 million cubic meters per day, unchanged from recent months.
Protests in the disputed region of Abkhazia have escalated tensions, prompting its Russia-backed separatist leader to offer his resignation and call for new elections. Demonstrators oppose an investment deal with Russia that includes tax exemptions for Russian investors and provisions allowing foreign ownership of property in the region.
As protests erupted in Abkhazia, the Russia-backed leader Aslan Bzania announced that he is willing to resign and call new elections. The move comes after demonstrators stormed the regional parliament, voicing their opposition to a controversial investment deal with Russia. The proposed agreement, which offers Russian investors tax and customs duty exemptions, has sparked significant unrest. If ratified, the deal would grant substantial economic benefits to Russian investors in Abkhazia, further increasing Moscow's influence in the region. The agreement also includes a highly contentious apartments bill, which seeks to lift the region's ban on foreign ownership of property, allowing Russians to buy real estate along the Black Sea coast.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.